What's up, everyone? Welcome to my crazy ass channel where I like to educate y'all on how to live a freaking amazing life. So let's get into it. I realize that a lot of people just cannot do high fat carnivore or high fat ketogenic diets. They feel like the bung. They don't feel well. And it's not that they can't do it ever, but they might have to transition out of a carnivore diet or out of a ketogenic diet and do a low carb, high fat diet to kind of give their body a break and then retransition back into one of those two. But what is it? Who's a candidate for a low carb, high fat diet? And what kind of foods, the macros? Let's get into it. All right. I've done videos like this before, but I feel like a lot of people are struggling and they don't know what to do if they want to go back to carbs. Essentially, when you're doing low carb, high fat, it's not the same macros of a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet. You're going to have starch left in that diet. Starch is a carb, a starchy carb, like rice, like sweet potato, like parsnip. I'm not talking about vegetables that are high in carbs, and when you cook them high in sugar, I mean starch-based plants. And the reason why I want you guys to not, people are trying to do low carb, high fat on berries and on squash. It's not enough carbohydrate. You won't restore glycogen in the muscle. Therefore, you can put a lot of stress and pressure on the thyroid and the adrenal system because there's just not enough stored glycogen. Your body will have to go into the body factory, eat itself, break down amino acids to maintain a blood sugar so you don't completely crash and burn. All right. The people who cannot do ketogenic or carnivore for the short term are people either who are having no gallbladder issues or gallbladder issues. Gallbladder is an organ that sits on the right side below the liver. It's small. It's kind of crazy. The liver will make these salts. The salts will drop into the gallbladder, be released through a bunch of series of pipes and plumbing to meet the fat in the small intestine, to break it down into small particles so you can absorb it into the bloodstream and use these amazing fats to either to make ketones or to absorb fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin D. You guys are low in D, E, A, and K. That's the really the big, huge reason, and of course omega-3s and conjugate linoleic acid and other properties that are in fat. But a lot of you guys don't have a good functioning gallbladder. The gallbladder is either has stones in it like freaking marbles, or it'll have salt. So basically, the gallbladder doesn't make these bile salts, the liver does, and then it drops into, it's concentrated, then it drops into the gallbladder, then a flowy solution, which is not so concentrated, and then it meets the fat and scrubs it down so you can use it. A lot of people who've got gallbladder either sludge, where the flowy solution is thick like molasses or honey. That's when it just doesn't, it's not released properly through the plumbing, the pipes to meet the fat, and the fat, in layman's term, becomes stuck. It can't be broken down, and you're like, ugh. You could have a mild sense of sludge where you're just not hungry anymore to eat any more fat, or you just straight up are like, I got a right side pain, or you can be bloated. You could have a shoulder blade pain. You can feel nauseous. Vomit is the worst, or you have instant diarrhea like an hour after you eat. And for people, sometimes it can last like up to the next day. Or you have greasy stool. That's a gallbladder problem. And if you have those symptoms that are that severe, then you might have to do low carb. You can try ox bile. You can use supplements like ox bile, lipase, TUDCA, malic acid, lemon water, apple cider vinegar if you don't have a histamine response to these things, taurine, glycine. But often, if the symptoms are severe, like pain or bloated or instant diarrhea, you might have to go to low carb, high fat, and then potentially do a gallbladder flush. And then when you reintroduce the fat, you're using things like TUDCA or malic acid to like break down the sludge. And then other digestive enzymes like lipase, when you start eating fat again, are ox bile salts, which ox meaning like cow, gallbladder salts. That's the number one problem I see, where people should just get off of these high fat diets and go to low carb, high fat, which is much lower in fat, which I've noticed people who do around 100 grams of fat with a gallbladder sludge or have no gallbladder at all can tolerate about 100. That's about a table to 2 tablespoons in main meals or as snacks with protein. You can't drink the fat, because if you have a gallbladder problem and you're doing low carb and you're doing 100 grams of fat, then drinking it's going to frack you up. One really strange way that people can tolerate fat is like taking the fat from a ribeye, not from a ribeye, but fatty cuts of meat. So fat from the meat, and the butcher cuts it off and tries to make it as lean as possible. Take that fat that's been cut off into bits, ask the butcher for it, and air fry it. It'll be crispy. It won't be so rubbery as frying might be if you fry it. Grilling it will also kind of break down the texture of like really dense fibers, especially around the membrane, let's say, of organs. Break it down and make it crispy, and then you can consume the fat that way, and people have less pain. Or you could do raw fat, which people have less pain, weigh it on a scale, get up to 200 grams, possibly do a lipase with that, a digestive enzyme to break down fat, and you can consume fat more easily if you're having problems with major problems with the gallbladder. So 100 grams is 100 to 120 grams is what you would take on low carb, high fat if you have a gallbladder problem. Now, another person or type of person you want to think about is the hypoglycemics. This is the people who've got hypoglycemia, blood sugar's too high, it drops, or blood sugar is low, often low. People having this crazy insulin response, insulin dumping, and they're having these large amounts of insulin, bolus amounts being secreted into the bloodstream, and boom, your blood sugar slams down. And these people who are chronically low hypoglycemia, have experienced hypoglycemia, they try to do keto, their blood sugar is so destabilized, they feel sick, and they do keto and they're hypo or carnivore as well. Interchangeable, because it's all about high fat. And these types of people will feel so shaky and sick and tired and unmotivated and brain foggy and depressed and don't sleep well and wake up in the middle of the night, because that's hypoglycemia. Or you have postprandial hypoglycemia or reactive hypoglycemia to food, or you hit that afternoon slump, or you're super tired in the morning upon waking up, or right after you eat a breakfast. If you're severe and you're starting to feel that your adrenals or your thyroid is now being affected by the inability to keto adapt and having such severe chronically slamming down to the bottom hypoglycemia. So hypoglycemia, people will see, then this is what's confusing. People will do, like I had a client today, and they'll do a glucometer test and their blood sugar will be in the 70s, right? 70 to 80. And their ketones will look good, or the ketones will be low. And you're tired. That's hypoglycemia. Tired, hangry, shaky, confused, depressed. All of these things are showing hypoglycemia. And you type of people who are chronically in this state of always tired and always crashing post-meal or in the afternoon or getting nauseous or shaky from being hypoglycemic need to go off and introduce carbs. And the quagmire is, if you have histamine intolerance and you have a hard time adding back these starches, which I'll talk about, then it's very, very, very difficult no matter what you do. And that's the problem we get with a lot of people. Some people will have mast cell activation or histamine and a gallbladder problem and hypoglycemia, and like, what diet do they do? But if the gallbladder is like really making them sick, unfortunately, we're gonna have to work through the histamine intolerance. Here's a caveat. Some people who do keto have hypoglycemia, but some people who go back to carbs, they just can't. They just can't. It's like they eat a starch and they're on the floor. They can't pick them. They're so hypoglycemic. So then, if you're in that camp, then you might remain on keto and use olive oil. I hate to say olive oil because it's a salicylate, or avocado oil. I don't want to use an oil, but if your gallbladder is so destroyed and you're having severe gallbladder symptoms and you're having severe histamine symptoms to the starches you have to add back on low carb high fat, then you would do sort of like a temporary, not really keto, but trying to either use coconut oil if you don't have a histamine reaction to it, or don't have a problem with the caprylic acid and having diarrhea from that, to olive oil or avocado oil for the short term. This is until you work out that gallbladder. Yeah. And then you would eat every couple of hours. But we'll get to the low carb, high fat. If you are hypoglycemic, you're going to have to eat every couple of hours. You can't get around it. You can't. You have to eat it slow. If you have the starch, you have to have it with protein, and you can have a little fat. Now, there's this fear of adding a lot of fat with starch because you're having an insulin response. Insulin scoops everything in the blood, including the fat. Fat has more calories, and then people are afraid of gaining weight. But the reality is you can have a tablespoon or two with your starch because it's low carb, high fat. It's not high carb and high fat. You are able to not have a crazy fat storage reaction when you're getting fat on low carb, high fat, especially if you're active, especially if you develop good GLUT4 receptor sites, right? And if you lift, you know how to clear out glucose, and you go to bed early, you're less likely to start being in storage mode if you can balance other parts of your life to compensate having to eat starch with fat. Or you can separate it, right? You can take the fat and you can have it with protein. So a good solution to that is like pork belly, because we're going to have the fat and the protein together. So if your gallbladder is wacky, it'll be much easier to digest that fat with a protein, right? Because you're going to have like your stomach acids are going to start percolating, the hydrochloric acids, and then you're going to have the protease and the lipase start to try to break down everything within the stomach to start off with. Okay, the diabetic, that fits with the insulin resistant person. Sometimes those people they have a physiological insulin resistance rebound effect. You know, they're like, oh, if you fast, you know, it's so great. Or if you are doing carnivore, like you're gonna just lose weight and you're gonna be amazing. And people have like diabetic high numbers. Sometimes those people do better on carbs. And the crazy thing, it's so individual. Some people never do better going back on carbs with hypoglycemia. You have to go get a glucometer and test. And not only do you have to test your blood sugar to see the algorithm, the highs and the lows, but you also have to time it around the day, right? So with blood sugar, which is more important than ketones on low carb, high fat, you really just test your ketones on a high fat carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet with plants and protein and fat. So those are the types of people that might have to do carbs. Yeah, is what it is. On occasion, and pretty much like the protein is pretty much the same with all the diets, right? But people might be able to get away with a little bit more protein on a low carb, high fat diet because of the glucose response, but they're now dependent on glucose. Whereas on high fat carnivore and high fat keto, you're not. So your protein gets too high on one of those types of ketogenic carnivore and ketogenic diets, too high protein, unfortunately, can spike your blood sugar and make it very difficult, if not at all, to adapt, especially people who don't work out, right? Because their muscles can't uptake that glucose and use it. They just store and feel tired and then have their thyroid. And then the reproductive hormones tank because they don't adapt. So with that said, You really have to know your own body. And you can't go by your neighbor's sister's cousin, uncle's son, because he did great on carnivore or fasting, because he has nothing to do with you. You have your own body. So you guys stop comparing yourself to anyone else. It just doesn't work. So people keep asking me to do my food in a day, and I'm like, why? I freaking lift like a beast. I work out 6 days a week. My protein tolerance is much better than most people. So, not that I do high protein, I really don't. But if I did do that for a day and you copied that, that's not you, because you ain't me. I'm just saying. Um, so, let's get into what you can eat on low carb, high fat, and the macro, the general, because right, like I said, everybody's different. You want to keep your carbs, your starches, under 100 grams of carbs a day. I really don't like for people to have like let's say cooked carrots, like a big cup of it, because the grams of sugar rise, and a lot of you guys who are dealing with hypoglycemia will feel worse eating cooked carrots, where they become super caramelized and sugary. So be very careful if it's a lot of them. So basically, your starches are going to be parsnip, sweet potato, and rice. Now, some of y'all who've got a weak gluten intolerance have a cross reactivity and don't do well with oats or steel cut oats. So I really don't recommend them for low carb. Some people do okay with them, most don't. The main one is rice, especially white rice or jasmine, because the anti-nutrients and the arsenic has been bleached out, and the phytic acid has been bleached out. So you get less of the anti-nutrients in this bleached rice, which is why the dynasties, the kings and the queens did not do the quinoa in the brown rice of these Asian cultures. There's a reason for that. Now, the amount, right? I'm going to break that down in a second. The other thing is parsnip. They look like brown carrots. I'm going to show you guys in a second. And then we got sweet potato. So all of these are low, especially parsnip and sweet potato are more low oxalate acid, low oxalate rich foods. You know, some people are so afraid to touch anything with oxalates. It's not, the oxalate isn't the problem, right? It's the binding to the calcium and the green smoothies and high, like gnarly dark chocolate and spinach smoothies and too much stevia. That's when it becomes a licorice. That's when it becomes a problem. So don't freak out. Sorry, not that you freak out, but don't get too paranoid because you're having a sweet potato or because you're having a parsnip, right? Especially if you're not coming from, vulva filled with oxalates, kidney stones, liver stones, um, uh, uh, oxalate crystals in your tissue and in your breast. If you don't come from a severe situation, you're fine, my people. You're fine. Now, let's go over the grams, right? Because we want to be under 100. It's between 80. People do not do low carb high fat under 80, okay? Because you can't get enough glycogen storage. So if you're trying to heal from hypoglycemia, you're just going to make it worse. Don't do that. Okay, so we have parsnip. Let's pull up what parsnip looks like, because a lot of people don't even try it, and it's the perfect solution to add starch back. So let's check it out. Bam! Look at that business. So this is what parsnip looks like. They kind of look like white potato, but in the shape of a carrot, right? This is low oxalate, and this is also low in starch. So we've got 24 grams of carbohydrate per freaking cup. So that's pretty good, right? Because normally when I have people do low carb, high fat, they might start with rice at a half a cup, but you can go 3 ounces. You can literally go up to a full cup on parsnip, and you can make fries out of it. You can make soup out of it. You can just eat it with your protein and your fats. So this is what's really great about the parsnip. I'm pulling up the image just because a lot of people don't know what it looks like. Okay, then we have sweet potatoes. and yams, right? They're in the same family. And then we have the white rice. So sweet potato, so parsnip has 24 grams per cup. Sweet potato has 27, so 24 in parsnip per cup. And that's 8 ounces, which is 200 and I think 24 grams for people who live in the rest of the world who do not use ounces to know what a cup is. And that's pretty good if you're trying to keep under 100 grams of carbohydrate per day. That's pretty good, right? Or if you want to be around 80, then you can do a cup 3 times a day and still be close to be in that range of being okay if you're doing 24 or 27 grams per meal. Main meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner 3 times a day, right? We're trying to deal with this hypoglycemia. Now, rice has 43 grams of carbohydrate. So I only have people do about 3 ounces or about a half a cup per meal. So to cut that in half to have more, about 21 grams of total carbohydrates per meal if you were to do it 3 times a day. I mean, you could go up and do it a fourth time, but you really don't need a full cup unless you're really suffering from severe hypoglycemia. I think that a cup of white rice is too much on low carb, high fat per meal. Chop that in half, right? Some people who just need a little bit can go down to a third of a cup, who are about to just transition right back to or even a quarter of a cup for those who are about to transition back to high fat ketogenic diets. And that would be your tapering down from half a cup to third to quarter. You could do it like that. Or you can start dropping it down to where you have it only for breakfast. This is when you're transitioning. This is not when you're in the middle of hypoglycemia and gallbladder issues. Then when you're cleared up the gallbladder, you stabilized your blood sugar because you're using a glucometer, then you can start dropping it from 3 times a day to 2 times a day to 1 time in the morning, and then you're done. And then you go back to upping your fat to 200 grams, if not higher. Okay, so people are asking me about like berries, carrots. Like I said, carrots are going to be high in sugar, but believe it or not, blueberries are too. So we got 1 cup of cooked carrots, have 12 grams of carbs, but 5 grams of sugar. And people with hypoglycemia, they don't do well with sugar. Blueberries, they have 15 grams per cup of carbohydrates, and I think it's 2.5 of sugar. I can't even read my own writing. I wrote this so fast. So, can you have berries? Sure. Do I think you should have berries and stuff? Not really. If you're really bored of your food, you are allowed to at that juncture because you're eating carbs. Your body's going to be insulin and glucose and glycogen dependent, right? That's why we got to keep our carbs between 80 and 100. Your protein still should be moderate to low. If your protein is a little high, you can get away with it, but you're going to keep spiking your blood sugar and start storing fat. The thing that and everybody asks, can you still lose weight doing low carb, high fat? Yes. Yes, you can. But you got to be on a schedule according to your life, according to your blood sugar swings. If you miss a meal and you're starving, then you're going to have this insulin, this metabolic slowdown, thyroid is compromised, the adrenals start taking over, your body starts trying to raise the blood sugar, you're having an insulin dump, and then you can't lose weight. So even if your carbs are low and the fat's a little high, a little low in carb, a little high in fat, you have to be on that schedule according to what you do. If you're working out, if you're working late at night, you have to really be on a really strict schedule of like meal, snack, meal, snack, meal. I don't know if you're a first or second or third shift worker, like night shift worker or not, day shift or night shift. People with hypoglycemia really got to be careful. Now, people who are not doing it, they don't have hypoglycemia, but they just have a gallbladder problem. Then I would do high fat up to about 100, 120 grams. You can try no digestive support to then trying um, maybe taurine or glycine, taurine or lipase, or start with one, like 150 milligrams of like gallbladder instead of, they can go up to 1,000. So sometimes when you have 1,000 milligrams of ox bile, you get diarrhea because there's too much salt in the system. So it's salt. Remember, it's bile salts. And you have to eat every couple of hours, but because you're going to have lower in fat, higher in carb, but not too high carb and not too. But if it's your gallbladder, you might need digestive support, even though we're cutting that fat in half. Instead of eating 200 or 220 or 260, we're going down to 100 to 120. And I hope this helps you guys, because I need to go and chillax, although I never will, because I've got to write a list of things that I'm going to put in my March challenge. And let's just pray that I get there. I'm trying, because I'm a perfectionist and I want this. That's why a lot of things don't come out when you guys are expecting to come out, because I want it to be absolutely bulletproof. And I think I want to cover all 3 diets. Comment below if you want my challenge to be keto, carnivore, and low carb, high fat, because I'm going to challenge y'all. But that means, because I would hit 3 diets. Or maybe should I separate them? Let me know below. And let me know if you're struggling eating high fat or having hypoglycemia. Comment below. Tell me what you want me to talk about. Always be careful for the type of exercise, the timing of your exercise when you have hypoglycemia, because it'll tank your blood sugar, just drop. So moderate exercise while you're trying to do low carb, high fat until you transition onto keto. And if you never feel like doing keto because you want a diversity of food, well, now you've got a bunch of information to go by, which is to make sure that you're eating enough starch. Don't go too low, and you don't have to go too high if you're worried about weight loss. You got to regulate your insulin, check your A1C to make sure that your A1C stays around a 5 point. If you're doing low carb, high fat, your A1C can be between a 4.9 and a 5.1. That would be the sweet spot. But if you're in keto, you want it to be 5.0 and under. Yeah. All right, guys. People say, like, I love videos like this because you're not being distracted by your audience. I just want to say this, you guys. When I do my lives, I like talking to people. That's how I do my consultations. And I learn a lot. And I like to teach people the knowledge that I've acquired over the years, because so many people are having health issues or they're getting injured from the wrong information. So people who are complaining about my being distracted on lives, who cares? I always say, now I'm going to stop and I'm going to speak to my people. And that's when you stop watching, right? Commenting on below my chat section is just a waste of your time and a waste of my time. And it's too much adrenal issues for you. And we're trying to get healthy, right? Trying to get that stress down. Gosh, I have so much more to talk about, but I'm running out of time. And yeah, I hope you guys are living life to the fullest. Get ready, because weird stuff's coming. Get yourself ready. Get organized. Pay attention to what's going on, my people. And don't run to the DOCs every time there's a problem, because 9 times out of 10, you can fix it at home. Legit. Use blood tests as a gauge. Whatever the advice they give you, just keep walking. The statins, the this, the that, the thyroid medication, the yanking out your gallbladder. Do your due diligence before you make any decision. That includes, you don't have to listen to me or nobody else. You have to be your own advocate. Don't let some guru like me or anyone else be your advocate for you. Peace. If you guys want to learn more, go to stephanieperson.com. I have a calendar open now. So if you want to book a consultation, it's open because you guys have been asking. And I've got all open dates now, but things are starting to get booked. And when they get booked, they go faster and faster. Also have a course where I go into more of this stuff extensively at stephanieperson.com. You can sign up there. It's only $15 a month, but you get a lot of information and you have contact with me directly when I'm doing like answering questions and consultation, mini consultations and course lessons. You can go to my Instagram, which is Stephanie Ketogenic, and go to my stories where I post information every day and stuff that I'm going through, like that I moved from California to the country and how I'm going to build my house on my own. I mean, I have builders, but we're going to do it like DIY. And I want to show you that you can build a house without spending a bazillion dollars, and how I bought my land and got it for a good price in the highest part of the market because I'm a smart girl. Uh, and that's what we got. I'm Stephanie, and I'm 55, going on 56. I got energy for days and still got the mother second business. Some people hate when I do that, but I think it's because I really want to show people, men and women, because this is something I think I want to talk about as well. I mean, people really like to put you out to pasture. Like if I don't say my age, they're like, "Oh, you're like, you're 36 or something like that." But if I don't say my age, but if I say my age, well, people sometimes try to put you in this box, and nobody can put me in a box. It's just never going to happen. I don't care what you think. Don't tell me how to act in my live streams, because when you get older, you don't. That's the good part about getting older, is like you don't let people sway and change who fundamentally you are. I want you guys to feel that as you get older, your hormones don't have to tank. You don't have to be tired all the time. You don't have to be like, oh, when you get older, it just hurts more. What a bunch of nonsense. That's not true. It's only true if you don't take care of your body. Yeah, you have to work harder, but it's without struggle, you have no joy. You have to go through difficult things to get to the other side of that bridge and enjoy life. Like eat liver. And I gotta go. Peace. I'm also, you can find me on Stephanie Ketogenic, at Stephanie Ketogenic on my Facebook. And pretty soon I won't be on all this social media. I'll just be on YouTube, maybe in Rumble and BitChute, and on my website, stephanieperson.com. And I'm out. Peace. Life's good. Sometimes it's tough.